Welcome everyone to my presentation on biofeedback and its value to both clients and clinicians. I'll talk about my experiences in biofeedback and kind of what it's meant to me as a clinician. And at the end of this presentation, there'll be an opportunity to answer questions. So if you have a question, please type it in and I'll be able to kind of go through a number of those questions and give more personal answers to something that you might be curious about. Now for myself, my name is Philip Hughes, and I've been doing biofeedback for a long time, since 1980, in various settings, including hospitals, physical therapy clinics, and private practice as well. Currently, I'm the Biofeedback Training Director at Stens Corporation. Stens Corporation is one of the leading sales and training companies in the United States in the field of biofeedback. They're located in San Rafael. And I also still see clients at a place called Newbridge, which is in Berkeley, California, which is an addiction recovery program. So this is me, and wanted to kind of just give you a little bit of kind of introduction here. And I'm going to talk about why biofeedback, which is particularly helpful, I think, to clients, what's unique about that. And then I want to talk a little bit more about how I think biofeedback works, and then we'll finish up with some of the applications of biofeedback as well. So starting out here with why biofeedback for clients, one of the central ideas for me is that it's one of the few clinical interventions that I know of that assists clients becoming more proactive in their own health care and stress management. Bottom line, the experience of biofeedback empowers people to act appropriately in their own self-care. The Cleveland Clinic, and perhaps you've heard of the Cleveland Clinic in the United States. I enjoyed this kind of definition of stress. Stress is the body's reaction to any demand for change, kind of covers the board for almost anything. And of course, we can't eliminate stress. It's a part of our life. But through biofeedback, one trains the body to better manage the stress that we're under, and perhaps more importantly, how to promote recovery, both physically, mentally, and also emotionally. The fight-flight response, the human stress response, is kind of a central piece of biofeedback training. When one suffers from chronic stress, the body's fight-flight response is turned on continuously. Over time, the sympathetic nervous system, the stress nervous system, becomes to dominate and kind of lead to an overall imbalance of the autonomic nervous system. And eventually, this imbalance seems to be the source of the various symptoms and problems that we experience that are stress-related. Under stress, the leading physiological kind of indicators affect the entire body as mediated by the sympathetic or the stress nervous system, affecting brain activity and our ability to focus, affecting heart rate. I'm sure everybody has felt accelerated heartbeats under stress, muscle tension, rapid breathing, increased perspiration, and also changing blood flow so that blood moves away from the periphery of the body towards the core of the body for protective purposes. These kind of physiological changes are thought to be the underpinnings of a number of chronic stress disorders: anxiety, exhaustion, burnout, depression, chronic pain, tension headaches, high blood pressure, and insomnia are all thought to be related to one degree or another, to the effects of daily chronic stress that's unremitting. In biofeedback, what we're trying to do is to teach the client to rebalance, focusing on the autonomic nervous system. When that balance is restored through biofeedback training, physiological and emotional symptoms are managed. The effects of stress, which were listed above, are better controlled. And the physical indicators of stress that I mentioned above are allowed to recover to safe baseline levels that make them non-problematic. Now, medications often work to do somewhat of the same kind of objective or goal, but there are some problems with medications. One is that they really require no participation, no direct participation of the client. It's more passive rather than active. Medication can also be more of a temporary solution. There may be some side effects to most medications that are unwanted, even to a point of being more addictive in some cases. And often medications may not be indicated for children. Biofeedback, on the other hand, is more of a learning experience, a training experience aimed at autonomic self-regulation. Again, focusing on the autonomic nervous system, and through biofeedback, trying to restore that balance. As the symptoms that brought the client into our offices are better managed and better controlled, then the clinician is able to explore some of the deeper causes of the stress, the deeper kind of meaning of the symptoms that are being presented in a clinical way. Now, to talk a little bit more about how biofeedback works, I would say that there are three kind of successful steps to training in biofeedback. We need to accurately measure physiology, and this has to do with the assessment of psychophysiological kind of perimeters of the human body, and also coming up based on those measurements with an appropriate treatment plan. Then we also have a learning step where through improved and increased sensory awareness, people are starting to learn more about how the mind body works together. And as that control, as the kind of the autonomic self-regulatory controls become better learned and applied, then what we want to do is help clients use this control to optimize and kind of take it into the real world. This can be for daily activities as well as performance. Now let me take you into each one of these steps. Starting out with the measurements that we typically do in biofeedback, if you see, we often record brainwave activity. EEG biofeedback is kind of a whole wing of biofeedback that's kind of matured into kind of a treatment direction all by itself. But originally, EEG biofeedback was one of the kind of central modalities or measurement of training. Other measurements currently include the electromyograph, the EMG instrument, heart rate variability, the measurement of the heart rate and its oscillating patterns that are associated with balance, working with respiration, which for me is kind of the foundation of all biofeedback training. If a person doesn't know how to breathe, it's very hard to control any of the other modalities. Skin conductance, which is perhaps a little bit more of interest to researchers, is a very sensitive measure of the comings and goings of the sympathetic nervous system. And finally, temperature biofeedback, the measurement of peripheral hand temperature, for example, is a kind of indirect measure of blood flow, is the kind of last modality that's listed here. And all of these different modalities are usually part of the biofeedback instrument itself. Now, when it comes to learning to control these different modalities, what we want to do is to be able to help clients learn how to kind of bring one or more of these different physiological measures under their direct control. The clinician can be a coach, can help and maybe suggest, but doing biofeedback is a little bit more like riding a bicycle. You can give advice to a person, which may be helpful, but the client won't really learn until they're hooked up and they have a chance to experiment with their own feeling and their own experiences of control. From that point of view, biofeedback is highly experiential. The third part has to do with its application to real world situations. And in a sense, this is where the rubber meets the road. It's one thing to be able to control one's physiology in the clinician's office. It's another thing to be able to control one's respiration and breathing and heart rate variability at one's own office. So there needs to be kind of a transfer of skill which clinicians can help and guide with so that the client is able to use this kind of learning process in other parts of their life. Now, like all therapies, biofeedback training starts with an assessment. The most common assessment used is a psychophysiological stress profile. The stress profile, for example, uses all the different modalities that we typically think of in traditional biofeedback. Again, the EMG, respiration, skin conductance, heart rate, and temperature. And the objective of the stress profile is to see if they can find or discover physiological markers and patterns of activity that is unique to every client's stress response. The way this works is if we focus on one modality, for example, if you think about EMG, the muscle machine, what we would want to do is record the initial values over a baseline time period. And then in the stress profile, we would activate that system through some sort of stressor presentation. We can do a cognitive stressor, we might do mental mathematics, but there is a period of time in which we challenge the trainee in assessment, and you would often see that physiological system, like in this picture, in this graph, react. And then what we look for after that is the recovery process demonstrated, and how long does it take to recover? Again, if we look here with the EMG, we can see that the recording, in this case, we're doing 2 channels of EMG. In the picture, you can see this would include the left and right upper trapezius. And then we're going to offer up some sort of cognitive task, and the EMG is going to go up, which is a typically kind of normal response to the stressor. And then once that stressor has been presented, we introduce a recovery period, and we expect to see the EMG levels drop. An ideal return to baseline would be what we're looking for in a non-clinical or a non-symptomatic kind of pattern of activity. Take a look at this kind of demonstration of the same process. So you can see the EMG responds to the stressor. We have a rise in EMG levels, muscle tension goes up, and then after the recovery, when the client is asked to let go, they don't. And so what happens here is that we don't have a return to baseline levels of the muscle activity. And in a sense, this represents muscular chronic tension. And unless people are able to reduce that tension back down to beginning levels, it becomes fertile soil for various symptoms like tension headaches, muscularly based pain, and so on. This would be what it looks like at the end of a stress profile, and we're looking at all the different measures. And so here, what we're looking at is not one modality like the EMG, but we're looking across the different measures, circling where we might find things of interest, where we see kind of changes that might be important to note. For example, if we start out with the baseline activity, is there any measurement of physiology that is abnormally high? Or during the stress response, do we see one stress response affecting one system all the time? Almost ideally, in response to stress, it seems like if the various physiological systems share that stress response, that's more of what Mother Nature intended. But if you always respond only from the musculoskeletal system, then that system is more prone to develop symptoms. might develop headaches, tension headaches as a result. And then finally, we're looking at all the different opportunities for the physiological activity to recover or not. And the lack of recovery, again, is noted because that becomes part of our clinical training protocol, helping people to recover after stress. Now, biofeedback training is how we actually step in and help our clients be able to develop the skill that corrects the physiology that we found that needed attention during the assessment. So what we want to do is to use the training to really help people reacquire self-regulatory skills. For example, skin conductance, which is also referred to as GSR or electrodermal activity, EDA, through the use of graphs, line graphs and bar graphs, or games, we can have clients engage their physiology in a way that ultimately leads to success. And once that success is achieved, for example, they're able to decrease skin conductance levels below the threshold line, the training line, the goal of that session, then they can be rewarded with the completion of the game, or in this case, the kind of the animation coming to life. And this picture, heart rate variability, which by the way is one of the leading areas of biofeedback training. It's one of the newer areas, and it's a combination of training between heart rate and respiration. And if you look at this picture here, you can see initially this client shows a pretty good synchronization between their heart rate in red, speeding up and then going down, and their breathing in blue, inhaling and exhaling. But then over the course of this period of time, that synchronization dissipates, it goes away. And so this would be a loss of control. And then what we're trying to do is use biofeedback to train the client to restore that synchronization, that coherence between breathing rhythm and heart rhythm, which happens when a client is in a state of calm. And then once that is achieved, again, we can reward the client through, again, different options of the games or different mechanisms in terms of the training. So really what we're interested in is having people learn autonomic self-regulation. And this often focuses on strengthening the parasympathetic nervous system. If we think of the sympathetic nervous system as often the cause of stress-related disorders, what we're trying to do is to train the parasympathetic nervous system, very much like training a muscle so that it gets stronger and stronger and is able to stand toe-to-toe with the sympathetic nervous system, restoring balance to the overall autonomic nervous system. So through autonomic self-regulation, we can calm our focus, calm our minds, we can slow the heart rate, we can relax muscles that have been held tense for too long. We can learn to do slow breathing, dry our hands, which often are the reflection of increased arousal of the sympathetic nervous system, and increased blood flow and warm hand temperature. So advantages of biofeedback, it's a very active therapy. One of the things that I think the clients that I work with at Newbridge often are kind of surprised and I think delighted by is that they are not working to explore perhaps some of their psychological traumas in life. When they come into biofeedback, what I'm helping them do is to kind of recreate a relationship to their own body, to their own physiology that makes them feel safe, that gives them kind of a level of control that often people that are struggling with addiction don't necessarily feel or feel like they can kind of activate. And biofeedback becomes that opportunity to actually activate it. Root causes of stress can be explored more traditionally in counseling with the healthcare provider. Biofeedback is non-invasive, so we work from the surface of the skin, giving people information about how their own body is operating at this given moment in time. I often tell clients that biofeedback is like looking into a mirror, and they're seeing their reflection fed back to them. And then if they're able to make subtle changes in their physiology, they'll note changes in that reflection. And the practice of autonomic self-regulation, of balancing sympathetic with parasympathetic nervous system, this can lead to a practice over years. It can become one's life kind of ability to be able to restore balance if lost. There are limited risks and side effects to biofeedback. There are a few that clinicians need to be aware of, but very limited. And also, the research in biofeedback has grown tremendously since I started in the field back in the late 1970s and 1980s. So there's much more support. There's evidence-based, empirical kind of research that shows the benefits of biofeedback for chronic pain or migraine headaches and so on. Now, let me take you next into some of the applications of biofeedback. And if we kind of focus here on this slide, stress management is one of the big areas of biofeedback training. Um, any clinician that works with patients that are stressed out knows how clients feel kind of out of control. And biofeedback, again, turns some of that control back over to the client so they can better manage that stress. Headaches, the research on headaches is perhaps one of the strongest areas of research in biofeedback, but headaches and chronic pain are big areas of application in terms of training and uses of biofeedback. Any client who is suffering from anxiety, and in the somatic disorders, I think all clients are experiencing some level of anxiety. Biofeedback helps to manage that anxiety and rebalance the system. And as I mentioned to you, I'm currently working at an addiction center, and biofeedback is really helping people reorient themselves to their bodies, to see that they can have control in a positive direction over their bodies. And for an addict, this can be a real powerful learning experience. And finally, biofeedback is used for performance, not just for stress-related disorders, but any athlete or any performer knows if they're too stressed, they're never at their best. So being able to teach tools and techniques of self-regulation are as important in performance as they are for somatic control. Now, to integrate biofeedback into your practice, into your clinical life, a couple things. I would want you to know that there's a national organization, which is the Biofeedback Certification International Alliance. And this international alliance, this Biofeedback Society, let me go back a slide there, put together kind of the minimal requirements that are expected for clinicians to kind of meet to go on for certification. So in my classes, I'm always teaching with the idea that clinicians will go on to get certified in biofeedback, and I think it reflects kind of a commitment to kind of a training and learning set of skills that benefit the clinician as they then turn to their own clients. Mind Media Academy works with the certifying organizations like BCIA. Mind Media Academy is a worldwide sponsor of courses. Some of these courses are one-on-one courses in classroom settings. Others are online courses. But these would be courses that lead to the accreditation, both in neurofeedback and biofeedback, and are taught by some of the leading experts in the field from across the world. Mind media is well represented in hospitals and clinics across the world. Some of these hospitals and research centers use the mind media equipment and have really come to understand that mind media equipment is the gold standard in the field. It's really some of the best. And what I want to do now is kind of just remind you here at the end that you can communicate with Mind Media through the internet. You can also post questions if you want to do a follow-up question to Mind Media and get in touch with them through these various sources. So what I'd like to do now is to see if I have any other additional questions, and I'll answer those and see where we're at. So let me see if I've got any questions that people would like to ask.